today we have with us Steve Settler, the producing artistic director of the Weston Playhouse in Western Vermont. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Ralph.
And obviously what you're here for is to tell us about the 2014 season.
Weston's 78th season of summer theater.
78. That's a long time.
It is indeed.
Why don't you just give us a little bit of background about the theater, how it developed and how it has reached the point it is at now.
Happily. Weston is the oldest professional theater in the state of Vermont. It began, as so many companies in this state did, with a community that loved the arts and created its own theater. And back in the 1930s, a gentleman named Harlan Grant from Boston came over here and heard about the theater and pitched to the town the idea that they might run a professional company in the summer. He brought in an unknown actor named Lloyd Bridges to be the leading man. And in 1937, they started producing plays professionally, and here we are today. So it's
Lloyd
quite
Bridges was the first leading man?
Was the first leading man, and we were happy enough to bring him back a couple of years before he passed back in the 90s to visit Weston again some 60 years later, and it was wonderful to have him.
Oh, God, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, what is the season going to be like? First of all, why don't we talk about the main stage? And I believe your first performance is going to be analog and vinyl.
It is, and that's a world premiere for us, which is exciting in any theater. But when you're producing theater in a small town in a small state, it's especially exciting and an honor to be the first theater in the world to do something new. Analog and Vinyl is a new musical comedy. It's written by an established Broadway composer named Paul Gordon, directed by a Broadway actor-director named Michael Buress, who brought us a fabulous production of Next to Normal last summer, and stars 3 actors and a band of 4. It's 90 minutes with no intermission, and it's a completely delightful contemporary piece about a young man who inherits a convenience store, turns it into an LP record store, and although vinyl is apparently coming back these days, he's not doing terribly well at it. A young girl comes in and pitches the idea that she help him, but he has no money to hire her. And while they're arguing over the fate of the company, in comes a customer, a rather sexy, mysterious lady, who ends up being the devil and offers them a Faustian bargain to save the store. So I've been telling everybody that it's a kind of a combination of the sexual combustibility of Kiss Me Kate and the Faustian bargaining of Damn Yankees and the tuneful retro music of Grease. So if you like that combination, come see this brand new musical.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Now, on July 17th to the 26th, you have a show that I always thought began at Chekhov, but apparently with the number of characters that were added to the title, with the title being Vanya and Sonia and Masha and Spike. Now, how did Spike get into this?
Well, you're correct that this play was inspired by the great modern dramas of Anton Chekhov, one of which, Uncle Vanya, we're doing later in the summer as a kind of tandem piece to this. But this is a contemporary play. It won last year's Tony for Best Play. It's a comedy by Christopher Durang, who is probably the greatest comic playwright of our time in the U.S. And as I was talking about the musical, comparing it to some great classics, part of what I love about this piece is if you liked those comedies of Kaufman and Hart from the 30s with You Can't Take It With You and Man Who Came to Dinner and all of that, it's got that same kind of eccentric ensemble of family members to it. And then it's also got the wit of a Noel Coward or an Oscar Wilde. So it's just an absolutely delightful comedy that makes some social points, but also just gives you a rollicking good time.
Yeah, well, I'm so curious about Spike, but...
Spike is the boy toy of Masha, who is one of 3 siblings who live in an old house in Bucks County, which they've inherited from their parents, and the fate of which gets decided over the process of the play. There's also a soothsaying cleaning lady and an aspiring ingenue from a neighboring farm. So it's an eclectic combination with a bunch of Weston favorites in the roles. I'm directing it, and we start rehearsals next week, and I can't wait.
Okay, now as a former Bucks County resident, whereabouts in Bucks County was this?
Well, they purport to be just down the road from Dorothy Parker's house. So if you remember where that was, you can...
No, I frankly don't remember.
Right.
But...
Well, you weren't traveling in the right social circles then, were you, Ralph?
Well, apparently not.
The playwright actually has a house in Bucks County, and I suspect he's imagining it somewhere around where he lives. But
okay, I just was wondering if it was Doylestown, which...
yeah.
seems to be the center of Bucks. Well, it is the center of Bucks County.
Yeah.
Now, on July 31st to August 23rd, you really have a smashing musical coming in.
Do. It hasn't been seen in Weston in almost 30 years, amazingly enough. Not since my partners and I have been producing there, which is 25 now. And that's A Chorus Line, which is, of course, one of the great modern musicals of all time. Last summer, we did very successfully a 4-week production of 42nd Street and proved to our audiences that Weston can absolutely do dance when it needs to. So we've brought back that wonderful choreographer, Michael Rain, and put together a company of very talented Broadway actors, as well as our own young company. We hire 7 young people for the entire summer from the top conservatory programs around the country, undergraduate musical theater majors. They'll all be in it, and 4 young local dancers as well. So it's going to be very exciting, and great dancing, great songs, wonderful story.
Now, just out of curiosity, I don't mean to spill the beans on this, but are they going to end in that fantastic costume that they always ended in the Broadway
Well, I haven't seen the
production?
design, but the show is constructed around all of them ending up, the ones who are finally chosen, in the chorus line. So they'll certainly end up in some fantastic costume.
I remember seeing this several times in Broadway, and it always got to me.
Well, you know, it's interesting because it's also ironic because the whole, look at the American Idol phenomenon now and all those shows on TV that are so popular. This is that idea, long before those shows ever happened, that you follow these people and you get invested in various ones, who's going to win, who's not. The irony is that when they win, they become invisible and they're all put into a chorus line where they're dressed and choreographed exactly alike. So there's a kind of bittersweet victory at the end of the piece. But
Who was the dancer that became famous through that? Donna
McKechnie was the
McKechnie.
original Cassie, yes,
Yeah.
which is a superb.
It's a fantastic show.
It is. We're very excited
I'm
to be
sure
bringing it back.
it's probably sold out by now.
Not quite, but it's doing very well. And it is running for 4 weeks. So
Now, we already have talked about Vanya. Now let's talk about Uncle Vanya, which is the play you're going to have from August 28th to September 6th.
exactly.
Now, this is one play I do know something about.
Okay.
And having been required to, first of all, read it in college.
Right.
Amongst, what was the other? The Seagull, I believe, was the
Yes,
other.
probably, or the Cherry Orchard.
Other.
Yeah.
Now, I never did get to the Cherry Orchard in college. I got to that on my own. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Uncle Vanya?
Well, Uncle Vanya, of course, is one of the great modern dramas by Anton Chekhov. And this production is based on a new adaptation that was a huge hit in New York 2 summers ago, adapted by Annie Baker, who just recently won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama. We did one of Annie's earlier plays, most of which were set in Vermont, actually, called The Aliens, in our second space several summers ago, and she came up and loved it. And she does plan to come up for the opening of this production, which is very exciting for us. And it's a production that stars, among others, Campbell Scott, who's an actor, been seen television, film a lot at Williamstown and on Broadway, and his first time at Weston. But it's a stellar cast. And because this was a new adaptation with a kind of fresh approach to the language, it's being played as though it were set in contemporary Vermont rather than late 19th, early 20th century Russia. So we're not updating, they're not going to have coffee in a mug, they'll still be drinking it out of a samovar, and they're not going to have cell phones. But they'll wear contemporary clothing, and so many of the themes of Uncle Vanya that has to do with a family that has nothing but its land and can barely afford that anymore, concerns about preservation of a rural landscape and so forth, are so resonant to us in Vermont today that we thought this is a play that would very well stand the test of time with a kind of a fresh look. So that's going to be our approach. It's also the play that we're going to share with schools. Every year we bring in over 1,000 students to see school matinees at less than the price of a movie. So the last 4 days of the run after the public performances will be filled with school children, which is wonderful.
Well, that's wonderful. That's a great thing to do, too, to get kids accustomed to the idea that there is something called the stage in the theater.
Not always on a screen.
And you don't always have to have a car chase.
Indeed. No, and there's honestly some of the best performances and best audiences that we ever get. All due respect to our adult audience, they're really hungry for it, and they absolutely are riveted. So,
how long have you been doing this for schools?
I believe 1994 was the first school matinee. So we're coming up on our 20th
Now,
anniversary.
all the area schools are involved in this?
As many as can manage to come. We don't have the Playhouse very late into the fall, so we're usually producing this during the first week of school, which is a lot for teachers to put together. But we've established a good relationship over the years, and most of them have booked already now for next year. So,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah.
Okay, now following that, we also have what we call the other stage, which right now I believe is the Rod and Gun Club. And
Has been for almost a decade now. Our temporary space at the Weston Rod and Gun Club, which has become more than temporary. As you know, we're in the middle of a major campaign to create a year-round second stage on the Walker Farm in Weston. In a couple of years, we'll be there. But we're very grateful that for some time we've been able to use the Rod and Gun. When we started this series back in 2000, we were in a church in Weston, and then we went to the Bryant House restaurant at the Vermont Country Store, and then to the Rod and Gun Club. So it's been called Other Stages because they were truly other stages. But yes, we will have, as we have for many years now, 3 shows there. This afternoon, in fact, as we speak, we're having the first performance of our annual children's show. That's performed by the Young Company, about whom I spoke earlier. And this is a new musical version of the great children's story, The Three Little Pigs. It's music by the 2 men who wrote all the new songs for Mary Poppins when the movie was expanded to take it to the West End and to Broadway as a stage musical. Mm-hmm. And it's absolutely delightful. It is so tuneful that lawsuits might be possible because you won't get the songs out of your head when you get home. And the Young Company are delightful. The 3 Little Pigs are kind of jiving hip-hop characters. The Big Bad Wolf is kind of an Elvis figure, and it's just good fun. And half the fun, honestly, is watching the kids watch the show. So, and again, family-friendly times and prices for 3 weeks now. So we hope to get a lot of family audiences and young audiences there.
It's so rewarding to see kids learn that there is something other than TV and et cetera.
It's very important, not just for our future, but we think for theirs.
Well, I agree with you totally on that. Now, that's going to be from the 19th to July 12th.
It is indeed.
Now, on July 24th to August 3rd, you're doing something called Stoop Stories?
We are.
Now, what is that?
Well, as you know, one of the things that Weston has become known for over the last 8 years is helping to develop new work, plays and musicals. And one of our annual activities is an artist retreat, where we've had between 5 and 10 artists living in the houses that we own in Weston and working on plays or musicals either by themselves or with collaborators. And several years ago, we had a very dynamic Obie-winning actress-writer named Dale Orlander-Smith with us, and she wanted to spend some time on a piece called Stoop Stories, which is, many of her pieces are solo plays that she performs herself. And this was inspired by a lot of characters that she's known. She grew up in and lives on the streets of New York, lives in the East Village now. But so she plays, I think it's between 8 and 9 different characters. And the conceit is that, as with many New Yorkers, I'm a former New Yorker, on certain days, at certain times of the day, the best place to be is sitting on a stoop. So while the Rod and Gun Club has a ceiling considerably lower than the studio here, if she were to stand on the stoop, she'd almost have her head in the ceiling, but she will be able to sit on it in our production. And watching her morph into these different characters of different ages and genders and ethnic types and share their stories is really remarkable. And she's played it all over the country. She's credited Weston in the published script for the time that she spent here working on the piece, and we're so excited that she's taking the time to come back only for 2 weeks to share it now with our audiences.
Well, it sounds like a fascinating production.
It's a very special experience, and to see Dale, who is a real force of nature and a major figure in the American theater, so close in that intimate setting of the Weston Rod and Gun Club is something not to be missed.
I do have to admit, I've seen a number of shows in the Rod and Gun, and just the closeness to the performers.
That's the whole point of it.
I think it almost makes you feel like you're part of it. You're not simply viewing, but you're participating.
And that's why often the plays that we do there, like this one, the characters are actually speaking to you directly, or in some cases, as with the kids' show and the last show there, involving you. So, yes.
Okay. Now, I think you're going to end the other stages show this is going to be from August 14th to September 7th. was the Marvelous Wonderettes. Now, I haven't seen the Wonderettes before. I'm really looking forward to seeing this.
Well, thank you. And that's, of course, the reason we're actually not bringing back the original, which was a huge hit off Broadway and at Weston, but we're bringing back the sequel, which is the Marvelous Wonderettes Caps and Gowns. Because the last time they were with us, they were at their prom, and now they've made it to graduation. So the premise, as it was with the original, is that four high school girls in the late 50s have formed a close harmony singing group, and their interpersonal relationships sometimes infiltrate the carefully choreographed numbers. But at the first act, they're singing for their graduation, and then in the second act, we jump 10 years, and they're at the wedding reception of one of the girls who has married her sweetheart from high school days. We won't give out anything more than that now. But it's a great excuse to hear some of the great songs of the late 50s and late 60s performed by four wonderful actresses who've been at Weston and elsewhere before, and just have a really good time.
So who are the actresses?
Let's hope I can remember everybody now. We have Allie Gordon, who began as one of our young company members several years ago and is now in New York. We have Lauren Marcus, who was in our world premiere of Pregnancy Pact a couple of summers ago. We have Haley Bond, who is also actually going to be in Sonia and Vanya and Masha and Spike, but not as any of those characters. And who is the fourth?
Wouldn't be Susan, would it?
Susan Hafner? No,
Yes.
she's playing Masha in the Sonia
Oh,
and Vanya.
okay.
And in a minute, I'll think of who the fourth Wonderette is.
Well, I don't mean to embarrass you on,
That's
but
all right.
if you have never seen the Marvelous Wonderettes, it's just a pleasure to sit there.
Eva Berger, also a former young company.
I thought the time would drag it out of you. Now, in addition to your main stage and the other stage, you also have something in the theater called Cabaret, which
We do indeed.
Now that's going to run, I believe, for all the shows.
The cabarets follow each of the first three main stage productions. By the time we get into late August, neither our audiences nor our actors can stay up that late at night. So we don't do the cabaret for the very last week or so. But it's a Weston hallmark. Back in the old days of the theater, before the fire in the 60s, in the original building, there was a farmhouse next door, and they used the basement of that theater. They called it the cellar for obvious reasons. And the actors would simply come over there and, play the ukulele and sing a favorite song or whatever, and the local wives would serve milk and cookies and that kind of thing. During the second producing regime at Weston under Walter Boughton, who hired my producing partners and me years ago as college actors, it morphed into the cabaret that it is today, also now in the basement of the theater and in a kind of nightclub setting. We feature the young company because they have the time over the course of the summer, not being in every show, to be able to do the cabarets, but always inevitably members of the equity company decide they really want to get involved as well. And Tim Ford, who's been kind of the father of the cabaret, MCs at least one of them. And they're loosely based around the theme, but it's just a kind of a good unwind time for another hour after the play stops. And you can have food and drink down there and kind of see the company in a different light.
Well, I'm a great partaker of the cabaret scene. It's just plain fun. It's a real pleasure to be down there, and characters that you may have seen on the stage that evening suddenly are in a totally different perspective.
Yeah, we think it really rounds out the evening, and because there are those of us who can't always stay up that late, we've added Sunday cabarets, and there's one Sunday for each of the three cabarets in the summer where you can come, whether you go to the matinee that day or not, at 5:30 and have a wonderful buffet dinner provided by the Inn at Weston who run our restaurant, and then see the cabaret and be out by 8 or 8:30. So,
I mean, time to get to go to bed.
Exactly.
Good. Well, I mean, now what else is going on at the Playhouse? You do have other activities where you're dealing with forms of outreach and education.
We do. Most of those are understandably outside the producing season, since the summer is not a period when the schools are in session, and most of our adult audience are very busy just going to the plays and the other events. We do have two special events, single night events in the summer, both in August. David Sanger, the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, generously has donated for, I think, a good decade now his time to come and speak about contemporary issues and then take questions and answers. And we'll be doing that in mid-August. And then at the end of August, we're very excited that a young composing team who've created a new musical called Witness Uganda, which played to sold-out houses at the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, Mass., and is moving to New York next year, are going to come and do the concert version of that piece. It's based on an experience that one of them had going to Uganda and becoming involved with a group of orphan teens, helping to educate them, and then coming back to the U.S. and founding a nonprofit to make sure they could continue to pursue their education. And it's a dynamic piece, and we're very excited to have those young writers there sharing it in that form with our audiences.
When is that going to be?
That's actually going to be on Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend. Yep. Okay, sounds interesting.
So we have those events. And then the rest of the year, we have a variety of activities in the schools and working with local lifelong learning programs, local bookstores, to provide as much stimulation as we can, plus the New Works programs that bring people to Weston to develop plays and musicals. So
well, I remember last year you also did something here in Ludlow.
With the To Kill a Mockingbird,
To Kill a
thanks to
Mockingbird.
FOLA, exactly.
And
there may be more activities like that too. We have to get the plays up first, and then we can surround them with all that other good stuff.
Okay. Now tell us about the Walker Farm project and how it's going.
Well, it's going very well. The Walker Farm project is our capital campaign. It began back before the unfortunate downturn of 2008, 2009.
Yes, I think we all know about that.
And had a little hiatus there, but it has picked up steam again. It's a $10 million capital campaign, and we've raised over $5.4 million to date, including a very prestigious grant from the Ford Foundation. So there's been a national stamp of approval on our plan, which is exciting. And what we're doing is building a new flexible studio theater on the grounds of the Walker Farm, which is a 5-acre property at the north end of the village of Weston, which we've owned now for about 8 years. And that will allow us to provide a broader season. The Ruston Rod and Gun Club has been great, but it's so intimate as to be prohibitive in terms of some of the shows that we could do there. It also means that we can expand the season at either side of the summer. We hope to have a new play festival in May, and we want to get to a foliage production in October when neither of the spaces that we currently rent, the Playhouse and the Rod and Gun, are available to us. And then the other 6 months of the year, we'll use it for incubation on a national level and bring companies up from New York and elsewhere and work on our own pieces and share them with the community very often for free. So it's a very exciting way to be able to use the resources that we have and the supportive community that we have here. And I think it'll be a great contribution to Vermont.
Okay, now in terms of financial support, how would people donate to that project?
They can go directly to our website at westonplayhouse.org and look at westonplayhouse.org/tomorrow. And there's more details about the campaign and how you can donate. And certainly if they'd like to look at something of a more generous nature, we'd be happy to come speak to them at home and talk about the 5-year pledge that we're discussing with many others. Needless to say, you don't get to another $5 million without some significant investment from a lot of good friends. So we're spending much of the summer. If you see me at your front door, you might want to hide.
Well, knowing what you're coming for now, no, I think it's a wonderful thing just to have the to make this more of a year-round.
It'll bring more stimulation
availability
to the community, to other businesses, and also, frankly, allow some work to be developed outside urban centers like New York, where there's too many interruptions and too much scrutiny while it's still kind of finding itself. So we've tested this. We know that there's a real need out there. And we think it's going to be a very exciting and successful addition to what we do.
Okay, now tell us a little bit about how one gets tickets to these various productions that you've talked about.
Absolutely. Well, the old-fashioned ways, we still have a live box office, and if you want to come into beautiful Weston and shop in all the shops and eat in the restaurants and enjoy everything else around town, the box office is open every day but Monday, and you can stop right at the Playhouse and get your ticket and save on all kinds of service charges that have to be imposed when you're doing it in other ways. Then there's the good old-fashioned telephone, which is also available only on those days at those hours. 824-5288 is the long-standing box office number in area code 802.
Okay.
And then, of course, the way that increasingly people are booking everything, which is 24/7 on the internet, on our website, which is westonplayhouse.org. And what's great about that is that you can actually see the seating. You can choose the specific seat that you want when you purchase.
Oh, you do have that added?
We do.
Okay, that's a nice feature.
Yes.
it gives you some idea of where you're going to be sitting. By the way, in case, I assume most of you have already been to the Weston Playhouse, but if you haven't, one of the lovely things about the Playhouse is that when you sit down in your row, you can actually get up, or someone can actually pass you, and you don't have to go through the process of trying to shrink yourself.
Exactly. It's got the most wonderful leg room of any theater I think I've ever been in. And Ray Austin, who designed it, was a diminutive man in terms of his personal height, but he really thought about the comfort of the audience in many ways. We often talk about this. If you ever go up to the balcony at the Playhouse or down to the Cabaret, the stairs have a very low rise and a fairly deep tread. And that's because he set up different staircases for the board in those days to walk up and down, and said, now imagine you've got people behind you and they're all trying to go at the same time as you are. Aren't you more steady when you have more to stand on and less to climb? So he really thought about so many different things that would make the place as gracious as it is.
Oh, it's such a pleasant
today.
theater to go to.
It really is. It's it was called one of the most beautiful theaters in New England by the Boston Globe some years ago, and we certainly agree.
Well, it still is.
And very comfortable. And then you have that beautiful waterfall behind. You have the village green in front. We used to have cows on the bank, and we could really complete the whole Vermont picture, but the cows have moved.
Well, they have moved. I was wondering about that. Last year, I didn't see any of them.
No, they're gone now.
Where have they gone?
I didn't ask. Probably to Burger King, but there's a great story that when the very first musical at Weston was done back in the 50s by the then producer Harlan Grant, it was Brigadoon, and he hired a bagpiper to walk that hill on the opposite side of the river. So people would come to the theater and they'd hear the bagpiper, and sometimes it was walking through the mist over there. Talk about theatrical. So.
Well, I hope he cleaned his shoes.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you just give us a summary about the season?
Well, increasingly our seasons and our audiences have wanted this, are anchored by some of the great pieces that people haven't seen for a while but want to see again, like A Chorus Line or Uncle Vanya, even the Marvelous Wonderettes. But audiences also like to see something new. They want to see the latest hit from New York, whether they saw it there or increasingly perhaps don't bother to go down because they can see it here. And then it's been very rewarding to us to be able to pepper into that some brand new work like analog and vinyl, so that when that goes on, as this one hopefully will, to a successful future life, you can say, well, I saw it the first time at the Weston Playhouse. So we hope that it's a mix. Our intention is to give a season where anybody who wants to go to theater in the summer can find something, and people that want a lot of theater feel that every time they go, there's a different kind of reward for them.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for being here, and I hope everyone who's viewing this really gets a chance to go to the Weston Playhouse, because it's a marvelous theater, and they are offering some wonderful plays and musicals this year.
Thanks, Ralph. If we have time, I just want to add there's a special discount for Vermonters, so look at our VTICs. We've increased it this year. 25 tickets for $25 for every show at the Playhouse, 15 tickets for $15 for every show in the Rod and Gun Club until we run out. So we want to be sure this theater is affordable to anyone who lives in Vermont. So ask for the VTICs. If you're a Vermont resident, bring your driver's license. You can get 2. Okay,
well, that's nice to know.
Thank you.
Well, my wife has already bought tickets, so I don't know whether she knew that.
Well, buy some more.
Okay, thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.
And that's going to be a wrap for us now. See you in the future.